As Andreas mentioned, our topic is seeing with vision. And this is something that has captivated Robert and I for years now. Vision is a perfect topic for this conference because it's the course's version of love at first sight. And what makes vision so important for all of us as students of the course is that as you read the course, you may note that it mentions the word goal hundreds of times. I did a search this morning and I found over 400 references to the word goal. And it lists many goals on this path. The course says that its goal for you is happiness and peace. It says that it has a goal of knowledge. There's a goal of using time correctly, and so on and so forth. But the one goal that it mentions more than any other goal is the goal of vision, or what the course also calls true perception. And so what this means is that the work that we are being asked to do as we walk this path is primarily meant to bring us to a place where we inwardly see God's holiness in all things. And this becomes the basis for our love. And of course, it becomes the basis for our forgiveness. So with all that said, let's get into vision and what it is. So Robert, as I mentioned, the course is ultimately about seeing clearly and about seeing with love. And in the course, these are the same things, but they seem very different to us in these bodies. We don't see clearly, or our world wouldn't be full of such hate and attack. So what's going on here?
Yeah, I think a good place to start is just to think about how our lack of clear seeing plagues our lives. And I don't even mean in the course's sense of seeing clearly. We are just constantly trying to figure out what things mean, right? We disagree with each other all the time on what things mean. We talk about your truth and my truth. We disagree in our relationships about how to see things. And we disagree on a societal level. You know, think about the debates that rage on a collective level about what is the best course of action politically. You know, what is the best this or that, what's the right path. And that just shows that we don't really know what things mean. We're walking around in a constant kind of fog, wondering. There's a great line in the course. Actually, it's in the edition that we publish, which we call the CE, but it's a great line. It says, "Man's only hope is to see things as they are."
So if man's only hope is to see things as they are, we're in trouble because we're not seeing each other as we really are. So what is it that is blocking us from seeing this way?
I think there are a lot of things blocking us, and it's broader than, of course, seeing each other is the main kind of sight the course talks about, but all sorts of sight. We're just confused about everything we see. One of the problems, of course, is that our egos distort things, right? We all know about the problem of human bias. What we want to see has a powerful distorting effect on what we see. As a result, we tend to see more of what we want to see than what's there. Have you ever been in a relationship where you thought or even said You're just seeing what you want to see. This is a constant factor in all of our perception and in our interactions. There's a great quote. I don't know if it's familiar in the non-English speaking world, but it's from a writer named Upton Sinclair. And what he said was, it is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it. We respond to that quote because we see the truth in it. We are all so geared towards seeing what we want to see, not what's there.
Yeah, and there's an additional obstacle as well. So often, all we can see is the outer appearance, and we can't really get to a place where we see beneath or beyond that.
Right. Like, even if we had no bias, when we look out at the world with our eyes, we just see forms, right? We see shapes, we see color, we see motion. What we don't see is meaning. We don't see what things mean. And obviously, we know that you can ascribe different meanings to the same form, and people do, right? So the fact that we don't see meaning means we're always wondering what something means, what a person means, what a situation means, what a certain event means, what a certain form means. We're always guessing. And the guessing obviously implies uncertainty, and that uncertainty ultimately is crippling. Not having a firm confidence in what things mean is constantly undermining us in terms of our mood.
Yeah, you're right. We are constantly guessing about what things mean just based on what our eyes are showing us on that level of form. And so that is not only confusing, but it's deceptive, right?
Yeah, I
Because the
mean,
forms are always fooling us.
they're always fooling us. And this is something you learn more and more just as you grow up. Appearances are very often meant to deceive. When you see advertising, right? That it's not there to report the truth to you. It's there to sell you something. And everything is advertising all the time. Things in
Even
nature,
these forms.
even these forms. I mean, we all put on a certain physical appearance. We put on a certain appearance as people in terms of our personality and how we portray ourselves. We all put a lot of effort into that because we're advertising. We're trying to sell something. We're trying to sell ourselves. And think about nature. Nature is full of false advertising. Different animals have certain deceptive appearances. Different plants do. One of my favorite examples of this, which you probably know about, is the anglerfish. And it's this fish that sits at the bottom of the sea, and it has this little appendage attached to its forehead that's worm-like, and it just wiggles and it looks like a worm. It's not a worm. And other fish are attracted to it to eat the worm. And when they get close enough, the anglerfish swallows them. Okay. We've probably all known some anglerfish, right? And this leads to the fact that you can know someone sometimes for decades. And at the end of that time, think, oh my God, I never really knew them. I was taken in by the advertising, right?
Yeah, it's funny that you said we've all known some anglerfish. And I was thinking in my head as you were talking about that's very common in relationships, right? Particularly if you're only looking at form, you think you're signing up for one thing, and maybe you have been deceived by the way the person advertised themselves. And when you get into it, you realize, oh, this is completely different than what I thought. and perhaps even the same as what I've had in relationships before. So we're constantly in this cycle of deception in our relationships, what we think we're getting versus what we actually get. And this is part of why the Course says that we're blind. We're in this cycle because we don't see what things really are and who we really are and what things really mean. And so the Course says that we're blind.
An interesting claim, but if you think about it, what's worth seeing is what things really are and what they mean. And we don't see that. We're always guessing at that. And so the Course openly says we're blind. There's a great image in the section called The Forgotten Song, a beloved section among Course students, where it talks about the blind. And it says, this is a quote, it says, they stumble and fall because of what they did not recognize, or walk unharmed through open doors that they thought were closed. So they stumble over things they didn't see were there. And there are open doorways that they also don't realize are there until they stumble through them. And if you think about it, that's how we go through life. When was the last time you stumbled and fell over something you didn't realize was there? When was the last time, and of course we don't know this, when an open doorway stood in front of you and you didn't realize you could walk through it? So from the Course's standpoint, we live and go through life just like the blind do, because in the most important respect, we are blind.
That's depressing.
It's depressing. And then in addition to that, the world that we see tends to be depressing and unsatisfying. So, we don't see what things mean, but what we do see tends to be difficult. For instance, go ahead. Yeah.
We don't see what things mean, and what we do see is deceptive.
And it's downright frightening.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
This is part of why we're so afraid all the time.
Yeah, there's a great quote from chapter 25 in the text, and I'll just read a few lines of it. It says, "Is it not evident that what the body's eyes perceive fills you with fear? Perhaps you think you find a hope of satisfaction there. Perhaps you fancy to attain some peace and safety in the world as you perceive it. Yet it must be evident the outcome does not change. Despite your hopes and fancies, always does despair result."
Reminds me of the seek but do not find. We're constantly in that place where we're seeking and not finding.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we don't see the truth, but what we do see tends to fill us with fear and anxiety.
Right. And when it comes to seeing, the Course, as I mentioned in the introduction, the Course is very interested, and this is what our whole talk is about today. The Course is very interested in getting us to see clearly. But we have some obstacles to that, as we've been talking about. And one of them is the Course constantly, well, a few times it references weary eyes or tired eyes. So what does it mean when it uses that phrase?
It's a very interesting phrase. I went online the other day and looked up the phrase tired eyes, and all of the returns were about eye strain, right? Sources of eye strain. That's not what the Course means. It means that our eyes are tired from seeing things we wish we would never have seen. If you think about all of the things that we wish we never had seen, there's a lot of them, and they add up. So our eyes are tired from seeing a world full of things we'd rather not see.
Right. And the things that we do see, the forms that they take on, make it very hard to love in this world. You know, we may say that we love this world, but all of our fear and all of our anger and all of our attack are about the world. And it's hard to love other people too, based on just what our eyes are showing us. You know, we want to love everyone. As spiritual students, we aspire to do that. That's why we're on this path. And yet, what we find as we go through life is that our love is very conditional. It depends on the form and what the form is, how the form is behaving, right? So
Yeah.
people
How
do
attractive is the
things,
form and how nice is the behavior?
right? So a lot of what we see in others isn't all that lovable. So what do we do with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think we should just pause a moment and appreciate how much we would like to love everyone and how bad we feel over our failure to love fully and unconditionally. But it's because what we see, what they show us, is often not very lovable, right? Their physical appearance may not be so great. Their behavior, even more importantly, may not be so great. And so we want to love, but it feels like the person that they present to us is hard to love.
Right. So this brings us to, what do we do? What do we do as course students when we want to be loving in the world, and yet we are feeling that internal resistance?
Right. Well, the solution to all of this, unsurprisingly, is vision. It's the solution to everything we've talked about. The fact that we don't see things as they are, that our sight is full of bias, that we only see appearances and deceptive appearances as that we see a world that shows us sights we would rather not see, sights that make us feel anxious and afraid and give us tired eyes. The solution to all of that is what the Course calls vision. As Emily mentioned, that's the same concept as what it calls true perception, or as Christ's vision. Andreas, you mentioned seeing with the eyes of Christ. It's all the same idea. I looked up how many times in the Course the word vision appears, and it's over 300 times. And as Emily said, the way the Course presents itself, its whole goal is to get us from false perception, where we typically live now, to true perception or vision. And when we fully reach true perception, our whole journey of learning is done, and God lifts us into the state of heaven, and we're there forever. We don't come back to this world.
And this is, the vision is an inward seeing, right? Because our physical, it's not something that we see with our physical eyes, because the Course says that our physical eyes were not made to see. I love the phrase in the Course where it says something like, your senses have no sense.
Yeah.
So this is not so much what we see with our physical eyes, but what we know inwardly.
Yeah, I mean, the Course wouldn't really use the word knowing because that has a technical meaning in the Course, but that's how we would think of it. So let's talk about this. As Emily just said, the Course says these eyes made not to see will never see. Our physical eyes don't engage, or they don't deliver actual seeing. But the Course says we do have eyes to see. And there are two significant terms in this respect. One is the eyes of Christ, which Andreas mentioned. That's the eyes of Christ is a term mentioned 20 times in the Course. And then in the early dictation of the Course, and this is reflected in the edition that we publish, the CE, the term the spiritual eye was used instead of the eyes of Christ. That was the early term, the spiritual eye, and that later becomes the eyes of Christ. Okay. And the notion is the same. I mean, they both sound very similar. Eyes of Christ, spiritual eye. They suggest a spiritual faculty in us that can see what really is, can see beyond form, can see beyond ego. The Course says these eyes don't need our brains to interpret what we see. Obviously, our physical eyes, we have to interpret what those see with our brains.
So the idea is that we all have a spiritual eye in us, and currently it's asleep. Our job is to wake it. And that spiritual eye is the faculty within us that can see with vision. So
Right.
when that spiritual eye in us awakes, what is it that it sees?
Yeah, good question. I think before speaking to that, it's worth saying what a fascinating topic that
Right.
there are eyes in us that can see the truth, that can see beyond form, that can see the real meaning that we're always wondering about, and yet they're currently closed. They're asleep. And what an exciting thought that they could be wakened, that they could be opened. Okay, so what do they see? There are three things that the Course mentions again and again and again: light, beauty, and holiness. And it's worth, I'll say something about each one, but it's worth noting that the light and the beauty are non-physical because the spiritual eye sees the non-physical. Okay. So let's start with light. There's a great passage in Lesson 158 that actually Dr. Bob Rosenthal read the other night, or I don't know when, I guess it would have been night for people in Germany. Okay, here's how it goes. Christ's vision has one law. It does not look upon a body and mistake it for the Son whom God created. It beholds a light beyond the body, an idea beyond what can be touched, a purity undimmed by errors, pitiful mistakes, and fearful thoughts of guilt from dreams of sin. It sees no separation, and it looks on everyone, on every circumstance, all happenings, and all events without the slightest fading of the light it sees. So it sees beyond the body a light in everyone. It sees the same light, and those lights are joined, not separate. And it looks on everything without the slightest fading of that light.
It's a remarkable idea.
It is, and it's very similar to the image at the end of the Forgotten Song, where you see an arc of light that turns into a circle fills with light, and then the whole thing expands. And then at the end of that, he says, "This is the vision of the Son of God."
Mm-hmm.
So when we see with Christ's vision, when we see the Son of God and others, we just see endless light.
Mm.
Okay, the next thing is beauty. And if you look up the references in the Course to beauty and loveliness, again and again and again, they are associated with vision. Okay, and so here is my favorite passage about beauty in relation to vision. This is from chapter 17 in the text, section 2. It says, "Can you imagine how beautiful those you forgive will look to you? In no fantasy have you ever seen anything so lovely. Nothing you see here, sleeping or waking, comes near such loveliness, and nothing will you value like unto this, nor hold so dear. Nothing that you remember that made your heart seem to sing with joy has ever brought you even a little part of the happiness this sight will bring you." So we all know that to see something beautiful brings happiness. And what this passage is saying is that to see the true beauty in others will bring a happiness unlike anything we experience in this world.
Right. And you think about the things that make us the most happy, like stack up all the pleasures of life. And the Course says that none of them can come even dimly to what this is, what seeing with vision is for us in
Amazing
terms
thought.
of bringing us happiness.
Yeah. And I think to explain this, we have to assume, and this is basically said, that it's not a beauty of the body. It's a beauty of the soul. It's a beauty of the spirit. And when you think about what makes someone have inner beauty, it's always some kind of goodness, right? If you
Mm-hmm.
think about people who you would call having inner beauty or possessing of inner beauty, I think you're basically saying there's something good in them that makes them inwardly beautiful. So the beauty we're talking about seeing with vision is an extreme goodness that is so good that looking upon it would be the happiest sight you could have.
And it all builds to holiness, which feels like far beyond beauty. And I mean, holiness is equated with light, but holiness just feels like the big crescendo of it all, if we can see each other that way.
I think holiness, as we had light, we had beauty, now we have holiness. I think holiness is kind of the summary concept, because the light we see is the light of holiness. And the beauty we see is, as I said, the beauty of extreme goodness. And goodness taken to the ultimate extreme becomes holiness. Holiness, I think, I don't know about the German course scene, but in America, we tend to shy away. We course students tend to shy away from the word holiness because it's a big word. It suggests something. Well, if you look it up in the dictionary, it refers to divine purity, to saintliness, to moral perfection, to complete righteousness. It refers to, like I said, a kind of a goodness that is so extreme that it's divine. And to talk about that within ourselves and within others, it seems so big that we tend to, at least in American course circles, we tend to shy away from it.
Well, here we're trying so hard to see each other with equality. And equality feels like such a stretch for so many. And yet, what the Course is asking us to do is light years beyond that. Like, it's holiness.
Yeah.
It's God dwells in this person, everyone without exception. And we struggle so much with just basic fairness to each other.
Right.
And here the Course is asking us to go so much further beyond that.
Yeah.
Holiness.
My very favorite passage about this is in lesson 161 in the workbook. And it says so much about how we would see people through vision. Here's the line. It's talking about your brother. And in Christ's vision is his loveliness, there's beauty again, is his loveliness reflected in a form so holy and so beautiful that you could scarce refrain from kneeling at his feet. So if you saw someone through vision, they would seem so holy that you would be like spontaneously tempted to kneel at their feet and could hardly hold yourself back.
It's an amazing idea
It
that
really is.
something truly holy and divine lives in each of us. And if we see each other with vision, that is what we're seeing beyond the form or the behavior or the personalities that we all have.
It's
It's
amazing.
beautiful. Yeah. So how does this concept connect to what the Course calls the real world?
Yeah, the real world in the Course. Another topic that I wish we talked about more is really the world that you see through vision. And there's a couple of things that strike me about how that world is described in the Course. One is that we see only the loving thoughts. So, whereas now we tend to look for all the corruption in the world, all of the attacking behavior, through vision, we only see a world composed of all the loving thoughts. And that would be amazing just by itself. Another thing that really strikes me is that again and again, the world we see through vision, the real world, is we see it as loving us, as blessing us. Now, obviously, our physical eyes still see the same old forms who often do anything but love and bless us. But through vision, we see something in everyone and everything that just is constantly pouring love at us. And I wanted to read a few Course quotes about that because they're just so beautiful. Lesson 60 says, everyone and everything I see will lean toward me to bless me. Lesson 68 talks about seeing, quote, a world that protects you and loves you and that you love in return. And lesson 156 has this whole image of being in nature and seeing nature behave this way. It says, the waves bow down before you, and the trees extend their arms to shield you from the heat and lay their leaves before you on the ground that you may walk in softness, while the wind sinks to a whisper round your holy head. What I find interesting about that passage, where nature, the waves, the trees, the wind, they're all like honoring the divinity within us. There are stories about holy people who walk out in nature and experience things just like that. I knew a spiritual master, 30 years ago, and the animals would hang out on the balconies of his house like bears and deer would hang out together and not hurt each other while they were within his house. And I even saw bears on his balcony. So there's something that the Course says is out there that recognizes the divinity in us and that will even respond to that divinity actively if we are in touch with it ourselves.
Right. And as I'm listening to these beautiful passages in the Course about things leaning towards and blessing us and our capacity to see the beauty and the light and the holiness and all things, it feels like a stretch. It feels like something that we don't experience every day, and it's because we don't. But at the same time, experiences of vision are surprisingly common, right?
Yes, and that's something that's very, very important. I think our society has many experiences that were for a long time unacknowledged, swept under the rug, and then they slowly come to light, right? Some of them are horrible experiences, some are beautiful experiences. For instance, near-death experiences have been happening for thousands of years, but have only come to light in the last 40 or 50 years. And vision is a kind of experience that is out there. People are having it all the time. We just haven't recognized it on a collective level yet. So the Course even says, there's a quote where it says, no one in this distracted world but has seen some glimpses of the other world about him. So we've all had glimpses of the real world, the world seen with vision. And I think it's helpful to talk about these glimpses in terms of sort of low-level glimpses and more high-level ones. Okay, so in the low-level category, I would class the experience that Helen and Bill had in 1965 that ultimately gave birth to the Course. They had this famous experience where they had a conversation in which they said, there must be a better way. right? And the Course actually comments on that experience of theirs and says that it was an example of seeing each other, quote, through a vision not of the body. So it openly says they were seeing each other with vision, because by joining in this search for a better way, they were kind of letting go of all their judgments and all their history, their painful past, and they were seeing something fresh and safe and new in each other. So that was an experience of vision, according to the Course, but just not the kind of full-blown vision that also happens. So a more full-blown version, a high-level experience, we can find in Helen Schuckman's subway experience. And I don't know how well known this is among German course students, for instance, but in the 30s, like 25 years before the Course began coming through, Helen had an experience on a New York City subway. And what happened was she was revolted by the people around her. She just thought they were disgusting. Okay, so she closed her eyes to shut the sight of them out. And as she closed her eyes, she had this vision of herself as a child walking into the light of God. And as the child disappeared into that light, waves and waves of intense love began to come from the light towards Helen. And it was so intense that she had to open her eyes because it was too much for her. And she says, as she opened her eyes, she had a remarkable perception of the people that she had a moment before been so disgusted with. Here's what she says. I saw the light an instant longer, during which I loved everyone on the train with that same incredible intensity. So the intensity with which the light was loving her when her eyes were closed, with that same intensity, she loved all those people she had been revolted by. She says everyone there was unbelievably beautiful and incredibly dear. Then she says, then the light faded and the old picture of dirt and ugliness returned. So that was a great experience, example of vision.
Yeah, and I see a comment someone just posted and said, I really long for an experience like this. And as you mentioned, the Course says we've all had some flicker of it, and it is more common than you might expect. You wrote an article a few years ago about vision in the Course, and at the end of it, after explaining what this is, you asked the community to respond if they've experienced anything similar, and you got quite a few, right?
It's really surprising how many of us have had, I mean, we've all had the more low-level glimpses, but it's surprising how many of us have the more full-blown kinds of experiences. So yeah, what I did with the experiences that came in is I kind of put together a single example is composed of different people's experiences, but it reads like one single story because some of them were very similar. And will you go ahead and read that for us?
I'll be happy to read this composite of the Circle's community of vision experiences, but I would also be curious as to whether anyone on the call today, after having heard what vision is, has experienced anything similar yourself. So if you've had this experience, please put it in the chat. We would love to hear.
Yeah.
So here is the description of vision from our community. And again, this is a composite. It's not one person's experience.
Yeah. They're all quotes, but different people's quotes.
I was in a decrepit and ugly area, the ground covered with boards, rags, and debris. The people looked dirty and shabby. I passed a disheveled, dirty street person who looked very drunk. I found myself judging him. I wanted to see him differently, and so quite mechanically, because I didn't think it would happen, I thought, "Give me your blessing, Holy Son of God." All of a sudden, what I saw changed. I was now shocked by the homeless person, his overwhelming beauty, a beauty that I suddenly became aware of beyond his outer appearance. He was stunningly beautiful to me. I felt as if I should kneel at his feet. Along the contour edge of his body, there were some glistening, sparkling things like star points. Then I looked around, and it wasn't just this person. It was everyone. Everyone there was unbelievably beautiful and incredibly dear. Indeed, everything was alive and full of energy and intelligence. Everything appeared to have an inside, just as I do. Everything was urgent with life, which was the same in both, which was the same in the boards, broken bottles, and people. Every object seen under this aspect appeared exceedingly beautiful. All things seemed to glow with a light that came from within them. I saw it in everything and everyone and everywhere. It was in every grain of sand, in every molecule in the infinite sky. I saw that this holy light was the light of God. There was nowhere I could look that did not contain the essence of this being, and I have no doubt that I was seeing God. Then I felt the waves of love wash over. In that instant, I loved everybody and everything with incredible intensity. I was in a state of bliss. I experienced a complete certainty that at that moment I saw things as they really are. I knew that in our fundamental nature, we are love, and we are each loved and forgiven in each moment. Then the light faded. I began to be aware of time again, and the impression of entering into time was as marked as though I had stepped from air into water, from a rarer into a thicker element. Pretty incredible, huh?
That's truly amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see that there are things coming in the chat, but I can't translate them. So Andreas, I'm hoping that you can help here at the end. I imagine that there are some true experiences of vision in here as well. So Robert, if someone's watching and they're thinking, that sounds incredible, I've already seen a comment like this, that sounds incredible, I want this, how do we get there? What can we do as students to see with vision?
Yeah. Well, I have 3 points about this, and I'll go through them briefly because I know we're coming up on the end of our time. But the 3 things are: first, desire it; second, forgive; and third, do the course. So I'll expand a bit on each of those. First of all, when the text talks about vision, and it's a big topic in chapters 20, 21, and 22, the main thing it says is you have it by really wanting it. And it even says, don't worry about how it will be given you. That's not your concern. Your concern is just to choose it, which means to want it.
And you have to want it more than you want your judgment, your grievance, or your attack.
In your current perception of the world.
And it's surprising how much we want to hold on to those things, even in the light of all that vision offers us.
Yeah. Yeah. But part of why we've spent so much time making it seem desirable in this presentation is because that first rule for having it is just wanting it. Second thing is to forgive. Now, if you think about the Course's system, as we said, it's all about moving from false perception to true perception, at which point God translates us to knowledge, which is heaven. And the way we do that in the Course is we forgive. So forgiveness is an act of overlooking the outer person, the body, the misdeeds of the body, and seeing to the truth of who they are. Every time we look past that outer person to the truth, we're basically inviting vision. So you could say that forgiveness is a prayer for vision. So point number 2 is forgiveness, or forgive. Number 3, do the Course. If the whole Course is trying to get us to true perception, that means the whole Course is trying to get us to vision. So the Course as a whole is trying to take us to this experience, which means we need to really do it. We need to study. We need to practice the lessons. We need to do it all as devoted students. And as part of that, the Course is trying to train us to, just as we see everybody, overlook the outer person, overlook the body, overlook the ego, overlook the misbehavior, the misdeeds, and see past it to something our physical eyes can't see. So as we're really trying to do the Course, to take the Course, we need to realize that a central part of that is training our minds to constantly overlook what our eyes see in the person. Look past it to something that is light, that is beauty, that is holiness. And that, again, all of that is an invitation to vision. So want it, forgive, and do the Course.
I love what you just said about forgiveness being a prayer for vision. And to me, it feels like everything is kind of summed up in that, where if you want to have this experience, then continually work on that forgiveness practice through the Course, and it may open up for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more we choose to not hold on to the judgments, like you were saying, the more we're constantly putting forth a prayer for vision.
So you have an exercise, and then I would like to take some questions as we're running out of
Yeah,
time here.
I
But
know.
how lengthy is your exercise, Robert?
I can make it a shorter one.
Okay.
I know
Yeah.
that. I mean, we have a presentation that should have been like the basis for a 3-hour event or
Every
on our part.
day.
Yeah. So we've kind of filled it. Um, okay. So I've just spoken about looking past what your eyes see to what vision will see. Let's just do a quick exercise in doing that with one person. I was going to have us do it with many people, but just for time's sake. So go ahead, please, and close your eyes. And let's choose one person. It might be somebody you are very familiar with. It might be a virtual stranger. It might be someone you are having difficulty with. So whoever has come to mind, just use that person. Begin by looking in your mind's eye on their body, from head to toe. And as you do, see their body as just a shadow, not real and solid at all. and look past it. And now see their ego, the thing in them you react to, and all its mistakes. See all of it as just fog, just mist, not solid, not substantial. And again, see past it. In your mind, say to them, I see the little spark in you. That I may know the great rays. I see the little spark in you that I may know the great rays. So just imagine a little spark in them that you now can see because you are looking past the shadow of the body and the fog of the ego. See a little spark in them, pure and white, and then see it grow. See it shine outward in the form of rays of light that become great rays, shining out in all directions to infinity. This light is so bright that you no longer see the shadow of the body or the fog of the ego. All this person is light. The light of holiness. A light of such pure goodness that it is absolutely beautiful. With the beauty of the spirit. Feel a happiness at seeing this beautiful light. And realize that this has always been the reality of this person. You have just been blind to it. So blind. And finally, feel within yourself a commitment to learning to see this light. Amen. You can open your eyes when you're ready.
Thank you, Robert. At the end there, when you said a commitment, I really felt something in me respond to that, because it is a commitment. It is a commitment to want to see this way. And it does require some personal overriding of those judgments and grievances that tend to want to bubble up. And we have to use our practice to make that commitment to see clearly with love.
Yeah.
So we are at the top of the hour or almost there. I know if there are, I see there's a lot in the chat. We can go, or we're more than happy to stay and answer questions.
Andreas, don't you have somebody lined up like in 2 minutes?
Right after us?
We do have a few more minutes if you want to do a Q&A for a few minutes.
Okay.
Maybe 5 to 8 minutes or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Happy to do that. The only problem is I can't read the question.
We have someone lined up for you.
Okay.
Anya,
let me do this for you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Anya, and I'm just scanning the chat. And actually, there was one question that others were interested about to hear something about it to you. So I just read it to you, right? Okay. It's question to you both. Often, when I deeply connect to him with physical eyes closed, I am tearing up. I soften, I break, most probably my ego part, right? Can we say that I have the vision in those moments towards myself? You get the question?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, the Course does say that the eyes of Christ can look on not only the light in our brother, but can also look on the light in us. So perhaps that's what's happening in those moments.
But it overwhelmingly addresses vision as being the perception of another.
That's the big focus. Yes. Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, it is both, but the Course puts its focus on seeing the light in them, and that then unveiling to us the light in us.
Within ourselves, yes.
Yeah.
So,
but I would take it however I can get it.
But it's a circular process, though. It's in seeing the light in others. That's how we see the light in ourselves. So it comes that way.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's it, actually. I think there are not really questions anymore. It's more like, sharing experiences here.
Do any experiences stand out that you want to read to the rest of us that sound kind of like the examples that we gave?
Let's see. There's one actually in German who's saying she's working in trains, like the stuff in trains, and she's experiencing like standing in this light more often, and all the passengers are glowing in it very, very lovingly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. That's great. One of the experiences that I collected from our online community was one where a woman would have this happen to her at a store called Kmart. And she just said everyone just suddenly looked beautiful. And she said she spent 3 hours at Kmart just looking at people one time.
Yeah. And for another, we didn't have time to read it today, but for another really powerful example of vision that was recorded well before the Course came into the world, you should Google Thomas Merton's Louisville experience. And I wish we would have had more time to read that today. We read it the other day in a conference session, but it's very powerful and exactly in line with what we've been talking about today.
It's amazing. Yeah. We have plans for like a much longer time slot, I think.
Well, if that's it, we're happy to leave it there for the next speaker. But once again, thank you, Andreas. Thank you to the translators. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's an honor to be here. It's
been a real honor to be invited and to be here, and it's been a great pleasure.
I think all of us absolutely enjoyed hearing your elaboration about what's being offered as far as we can put it in words. and really spark or re-spark the motivation and the commitment to make this our goal, because this is what this course is about.
Yeah.
Well, as far as I understand, our life here is about.
Exactly. That's what it's really about in the end, not all the stuff we deal with day to day, the survival stuff.
Right.
Exactly.
And when the Course says that we're removing the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, that's our job. We remove the blocks and what's left, but that clear vision and love.
Exactly. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and your commitment to that. And I'm sure everybody continues on the path, well, somewhat transformed, I would say. You don't hear this kind of information, and it goes by unnoticed. So it does something with us. Thank you so much, and all your other work that you're doing at the circle and in your personal transformation as well. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you here.
Great to be
Pleasure
here.
to be here.
Let's open the micros for hallelujah. And for a thank you. Oh, it's
Thank you very much.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much.